Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on chatbots for higher education. In case if you can't hear me very well or the sound is cracking up or not really working as you would expect, it is recommended for you to connect with the computer audio instead of your phone. And if that doesn't help, please try to restart the GoToWebinar session. And just to let you know, we are recording this session. So if for some reason you cannot finish this webinar or you would like to share it with some of your colleagues, we will follow up with a link to this video alongside with some other important information. My name is Sebastian Vitalet, and I'm a senior developer advocate at Progress. So today's agenda is as follows. We'll start by looking at why chatbots. We'll look at different types of chatbot communication. Then we'll look at how chatbots can actually help you. Following that, we'll look at different types of challenges and best practices when it comes to building chatbots. Then I'll do a quick demo and build a chatbot conversation so that you can see how this is done in practice. Then my colleague Ilyan Ilyev will give you a quick introduction to the NativeChat pilot program, which is something very exciting, and you should definitely stick until the end to see that. And right at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So let's start with the benefits of a chatbot, or why do you even need one? So let's have a look at some of the benefits. When you use chatbots, for your users, there are no queues because chatbots can run 24/7 and they can handle multiple users at the same time, which is pretty great. Chatbots are also great when it comes to the speed of communication. They can handle repetitive tasks really fast. And because they have direct access to the APIs from your backends and all sort of systems that you are connected to, they can query those and provide relevant answers to your users and to your students. And also to speed up any type of communication, chatbots can display available options to your students or to your staff. And as a result, you are going to have happy students. And next, let's have a look at different chatbot communication types, because the way the chatbot communicates with your users actually varies and there are different types of scenarios. So the first one is Q&A versus step-by-step. So Q&A, it's usually when the user provides one question and the chatbot is trained to provide one answer for that specific question. So it's kind of like just one-step conversation. Then we have step-by-step conversations in which, in order to complete the goal, the user has to provide us with additional information. So it's not just like a one question, one answer, but it's more of a step-by-step flow. We can also have a look at static versus dynamic conversations, in which a static conversation is one where we can hard code the answer to the chatbot. So the chatbot doesn't have to look up any systems to provide this answer. So when we ask, when do the exams start? The chatbot can have already a predefined answer for that and say like, yeah, well, the exams run between 22nd of February until 12th of March. But a dynamic conversation would require your chatbot to actually query the backend to have the answer. So that when your student asks, when is the intro to calculus exam, the chat would have to check the backend and then it can provide the answer by saying, well, it's on the 27th of February at 10 a.m. Then we also have generic and personalized type of conversations, or we could look at them as linear versus contextual. So a personalized one, it would require for the chatbot to actually know who is it talking to. If the student asks, when is my next class? The chat will have to go and actually get the answer that is specific to the student. And in this case, say, well, your next class is Intro to Calculus at 11 a.m. It's in Park House, room 404. While the linear answer will be one that is pretty much the same no matter who's asking this. So if a student asks, where is Park House? This answer is going to be provided regardless of who the person is. So the chatbot can just say, the Park House is located in front of the library. It is the building with the green roof. Then we can also look at reactive versus proactive conversations. So most of the conversations that you saw so far, they were pretty much reactive because they're responding to the user. But a proactive conversation is more of where the chatbot proactively sends a message to the user and can say something like, hey, Sebastian, your next assignment is due on Friday. Do you need help with the submission process? And at that point, the user can actually say like, yeah, help me do that, or give me some more information. And the chatbot can say like, yeah, you can submit it at this URL, or I can help you with the submission. Just say assign submission, and I'll help you with uploading all the required files. This is a proactive approach. And then obviously the reactive one will be when the student says, hey, assignment submission, and the chatbot can then react to that and say, hey, Sebastian, I can help with that. Which module is this for? Cool. Next thing that is important to understand when we're building chatbots is that chatbots can have different channels of communication. By understanding this, we can pick the right channel for the right job. So the first type of a channel is a web-based chatbot. And this is one which runs inside a browser and helps guide your users in a step-by-step conversations, and it can provide the user with different buttons and various UI elements. So a conversation like that could look like this, where student says, I want to register, what's your name? My name is Mark, I choose computer science, I'll give you my email address. And by doing that, the chatbot was able to register the student and then display available modules. And that can go on with using all sort of list pickers and buttons and various UI elements that are available inside a browser. The next category of a channel are the mobile-friendly chatbots. So those are chatbots that can run from a mobile device. So the students can actually use their mobile phones to connect with you. And they will run over WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, SMS, Viber, so you can get to them on the channels that are very easily accessible. And here's an example of a chatbot that will run inside Facebook Messenger. So the person can provide their student ID, and by doing that, then they can go and check all the modules that they have enrolled for. And this is pretty neat because they can just do it from their phone and see their full agenda for the week. The next type of a channel are the category of voice-based chatbots. So for example, Amazon Alexa is one of them. And in this case, the students can communicate with the chatbots and ask the questions by just talking to the device, and then the chatbot can respond to them. So let's have a look at one example.
Alexa, ask mobile to check my balance.
Let's have a look at your account. You have $10, 100 minutes, 200 text messages, 541 megabytes.
So this is all cool, but why does it even matter that we have all different types of channels? Well, the way I see it is the students today that come to the universities, they come from the Gen Z generation, and their communication is very different to what we might be used to, where we used to talk to each other a lot more and we would enjoy more of like a face-to-face conversation or would call each other a lot more. While with Gen Z, the communication has changed. They prefer texting. They will use Instagram or WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger to actually talk to each other. And here's a very interesting piece of stat. So depending on the task that you're trying to accomplish, if you're trying to communicate with the student and make sure that the message arrives to them and that they communicate with you back and forth, you probably should use SMS because they're really good when it comes to reaching your audience. So pretty much on average, 98% of the people will receive that message and read it, and 45% will respond to all sort of messaging that you're gonna send out. The next area that I want to look at is the digital technology platform for education and have a quick look as to where can you utilize a chatbot. So basically when it comes to universities, you have a lot of different systems. And obviously one of the first ones that comes to mind is the student information system, where you could actually integrate with it and then teach the chatbot to get the data from the SIS to help your students accomplish various tasks. But a chatbot could work pretty much anywhere. You could, for example, use it as part of the student engagement, or you could use a chatbot for recruitment and enrollment management, or you could pretty much use it at any point that you have any sort of information or there is a required communication to go on. But before I move on to all the examples as to where you could use the chatbots, SIS is one of the first ones that you could probably integrate with. So if you're using any of those systems that I'm showing on the screen, or maybe you have yet another one that I just didn't have enough space on the screen, and you would like to integrate with them, then later on, Ilian will be talking to you about the pilot program. So if you have any of those systems or some other third party, just let us know And we would be happy to work with you to integrate that system so that you could actually use it to communicate with your staff and your students. So now let's have a look at some higher education challenges and how you could use chatbots as an example to address those challenges. When I spoke to a friend that works at a university and I asked him about the challenges, the first thing that he pointed out to was the registration season, where basically the staff that handles the students' inquiries keep answering the same questions over and over again, which kind of feels a bit like the Groundhog Day, where you just go through the same thing again and again and again. And this could be quite tiring to the staff that has to handle it. And we could really help with that. Because if you think of it, you keep getting asked the same questions every year. So you probably already know what kind of questions the students might ask. And we could actually use that to our advantage. So we could train our chatbot with various questions and answers. So we could train the chatbots to answer questions like, what are your support resources? Or are there payment plans available? How can I apply for scholarship? And on and on and on, which we could feed into the natural language processing model. So that allows the chatbot to actually not only be able to answer the questions that the students might be asking, but also understand the way people speak, right? So once we have a chatbot that is trained on all those questions and has all those answers, then the student can come in and say, tell me about available payment plans. The chatbot will analyze that and it will come back with an answer and then just say, well, payment plans are available for the current semester and they are as follows. And by doing this, you can actually release your staff to do something that is more demanding and something that they might enjoy a lot more. And the Groundhog Day, it's over. Another challenge that is really serious in higher education is summer melt. This is when students are enrolling to your courses in the summer, but when the summer is over and it's time to start the university, they never really turn up. And for this, we could employ chatbots and the nudge theory to tackle the problem. And there is a very well documented case study in which Georgia University used a chatbot, which helped them reduce summer melt by 20%. And this was achieved with the university staff needing only to attend to less than 1% of the 50,000 texts that were sent by the students, which is pretty amazing. So if you're not aware of the nudging process, let me give you a very quick overview. So the whole idea is as follows, like if we have the current behavior of what people usually do and we don't do anything about it, we are going to get the predicted outcomes. And like Uncle Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So in order for us to actually change those predicted outcomes, we have to do something about them. So what we can do is provide a little nudge. And a nudge should be based on some insight, trust, data, and providing some advice to the students. And this should result in a modified behavior and then finally improved outcomes. One example of a nudge is when we are driving, and whenever you drive over a speed limit, there might be screens that are showing you how fast you are driving. And then sometimes there could be a sad face or a smiley face, depending whether you're driving over the limit or within the limit. And by doing that, the drivers can be encouraged to slow down and drive with the speed limit that is expected of them. While in the universities, we could nudge students to attend classes and provide them with support when required. So here's an example. Maybe you can send them a WhatsApp message by saying like, hey, Sebastian, here's your timetable for today. It's Intro to Calculus, MA 101 at 11 a.m. and we would like to see you in Park House, room 404. And then if we haven't seen that student, we can add additionally saying, hey, we haven't seen you for a week. Do you need to talk to someone? And at that point, the student can actually say, well, yeah, like I'd like to talk to someone because I am struggling. And at that point, the chatbot can engage with them, provide available time slots. So the student can say, yeah, I would like to meet somebody at 10 a.m. And then we would ask them like, do you want to meet face to face or on a call? And face to face sounds good. And just like that, we could arrange a meeting with a student body in a local cafeteria at 10 a.m. And by doing that, we can encourage them to turn up to classes and we can provide them the assistance that they need. The next thing that I would like to talk to you about is around chatbot challenges or the kind of issues that I see when I interact with various chatbots out there. And the whole idea is to kind of like show you how to build an engaging chatbot and what are the expected and required elements. So one of the things that we should be definitely avoiding is fixed decision trees. A lot of chatbots out there would expect the user to go in a very specific order, which is not very flexible and is not always fun. So for example, if the student says, I want to visit the campus on Friday, the chatbot can say, yeah, I can help with that. Which campus did you have in mind? Yeah, it's the Alpha campus. When would you like to come? And this is kind of annoying because the student already provided the day when they wanted to come, but the chatbot had a fixed decision tree in which it first asked which campus and then the day, and there's no other way of actually handling it for it. While what we should be doing is avoiding those fixed decision trees. So if the student says, I want to visit the campus on Friday, the chatbot should say, yeah, sure, you can visit the campus on Friday. Which campus did you have in mind? And then the student can say, the Alpha campus, and everybody's happy. The next challenge or the issue that I see is the lack of understanding of business entities. So if we were to build a chatbot for a hospital, the chatbot should know about doctors. If it's for business, maybe you should know about offices or various categories. And when it comes to universities, it should be understanding entities that are related to a university. So a professor is one of those entities. So if a student says, I want to meet with Professor Burke on Friday, the child will say, well, yeah, I can help you book the meeting. What is your professor's name? And you see, the issue in here is that the chatbot doesn't understand that Professor Burke is the name of the professor that this person wants to see. So the student obviously says, what? And then the child goes like, what time would you like to see Professor what? What is going on? I am not trying to understand you. Me neither. And this leads to a lot of frustrations because if the chatbot could understand that Professor Burke on top of the screen, we wouldn't have this problem. So obviously, with understanding the professor's name and chatbot being able to extract that from the conversation, it should be able to actually grab a record of that professor. That's one of the things, and also say, hey, what time do you want to meet Professor John Burke on Friday? And then from that moment, you can continue with that conversation and it's all good. Another one is around lack of proper acknowledgement. So this is when a student provides with a lot of information and the chatbot ignores that fact, maybe captures that information, but it doesn't let the student know that it understood it. So if the student says, hey, I would like to sign up for a health insurance with Extreme Sports Extra from October 1st to February 28th, and if the chatbot responds with, what is your age? The student might not be quite sure if it understood what he was trying to say, so it's going to kind of respond with like, are you sure you got my info? The whole thing is that the chatbot should actually respond and tell the user that it understood what he's asking for. So in this case, you would say an extreme sports cover is always a good idea. So it's telling the student he got that piece of information. And the next thing would be, let's find you an insurance from this date to this date. Cool. Next one is lack of conversation UI. So chatbots are pretty good at providing prompts and available options to the users. So if the student says, can you book me a meeting with Professor Burke on Friday? The chatbot can say, yeah, I understand that you want to see Professor John Burke. What time? And at this point, this might not be too alarming, but if the student says, well, 12 o'clock, sorry, Professor John Burke is busy at 12. What time? And obviously, this is going to take a while and is not very, very helpful. So what we should be doing is actually using conversational UI to help the student, guide them with this conversation. If the student wants to see Professor Berg on Friday, sure, we can help you with that. And here are the available slots. And by using the conversational UI, we have those three orange buttons that kind of display the options to the user who can pick one of the times and book it really quickly. Next one is lack of long-term memory. So chatbots are a machine, so they should be able to remember things that they hear from the students or their users from previous conversations and then reuse them in the future. So if somebody says, hey, it's me again, can you book me an appointment with Professor Burke on Friday at 11? The chatbot says, yeah, absolutely, I can help you book that meeting at this date and at this time. What is your phone number? And if this is something that the student provided before, like it could be a little bit annoying, right? Like they'll go like, why do you always ask me for this? Like, can't you remember that? So obviously the better way of handling that is actually enabling long-term memory for the phone number example, so that the chatbot can say, yeah, absolutely, I can help you book the meeting. Is this still your phone number? And at this point, if this is the right number, the student just says yes. If it's not, they can say no, and then they can provide the actual phone number that they would like to be contacted on. And now I would like to get into my favorite part where I'll be building a chatbot right in front of you. So I will show you how to add a couple of questions and answers. And also I will show you how to construct a step-by-step conversation. And you will see how easy it is to do one. Okay, so this is the NativeChat development environment. And when you create a new project, you will usually arrive to this dashboard, which allows you to go to different parts and to do different things. So for example, we could go here to add Q&As or questions and answers, or we could go over here to create a guided conversation, which is basically a step-by-step conversation. And so I already created this project a little bit before, and there's already some functionality in here to just have like a more smooth demo. But I want to start with adding some questions and answers. So I'll go into question answering, and I'll create a new category, and we can call it maybe student Q&A. Okay, let's create this category. And next thing we have to do is just add a question. So I'll click over here. And the first question could be around the walking tours. So maybe we can ask something like, can I come for a walking tour? And maybe another version of the same question, when is the next walking tour? Let's fix this. Okay, and then we have to add like a group name. So I'll just say walking tour. And then finally, we have to add an answer. So maybe something like, we have daily walking tours from Wednesday to Saturday at 1 p.m. Cool. So I can save this and we can already test it. And I say, can I come for a walking tour? Spelling mistake, that should still work. And the chatbot actually answers straight away. And we can also ask, when is the next walking tour? And that will also work. So that's cool. And we could add yet another question. So the next thing we could ask is, what are the exam dates? And to be honest, we actually don't have to add these words over here because the key ones that the chatbot should be recognizing are what exam and dates. And also we could add maybe when exam session. Okay, so let's do exam dates for the group name. And the answer could be something like, the exams start on the 22nd of Feb and run until the 7th of March. Let's save this. And now when we test it, I can say something like, when are the exam dates? And maybe that doesn't sound pretty good, but the chatbot should be able to still recognize that. Or we could say, when is the exam session? And that will also work. And just like that, we trained our chatbot to answer 2 different Q&As with different variations or in different ways people could ask for this information. So as a next thing, why don't we go and head over to the cognitive flow? And this is where we can create our step-by-step conversations. And all of those conversations will be created with JSON. And the whole approach is that we are more focused on what is it that the chatbot should do, as opposed to how this is done. And this is pretty clever and it works in a really nice way. So I want to create a conversation that will allow a student to register for a course. So let's create a new conversation of type goal, and we'll call it register student. And as a simple step, just to test that this is working, I can add a step of type message saying, hello, register student. Let's add a comma, and that should fix that. Cool. So in order to test that this conversation works or train the chatbot when to trigger this specific conversation, we have to go into training and add a conversation trigger to say like when this conversation should start. So I have registered student over here, and we want to trigger this conversation when somebody says something like register student, or maybe register for a degree, but we don't need to actually say a, and then save changes. So our chatbot already has those options here. So I can say register student, and the chatbot responds with hello, register student, which is pretty cool. So the other thing is that before I go back to actually editing this conversation, in order to complete it, we have to ask the student for things like their email address or the degree that they want to study. So let's start with just the email address. So what we can do is actually train the chatbot to understand when somebody actually provides an email address and then extract it from a sentence. And we could use a regular expression that will basically extract this piece of information. So if somebody provides like a bunch of characters, and that can include like underscore or a dot, and then @ symbol, and then we have like the domain, and then I can create this. And right now the chatbot should be able to understand when somebody provides email. So I can already test that and say something like sebi@email.com. Test that, and you can see Chatbot actually recognizes this as an email, which is pretty cool. Okay, so next thing that we should also train our chatbot on to understand is the type of degree that the student might want to pick. So let's add a degree conversation, and we could make it static. So when it's static, we have to manually add each of the available values one by one. But I want to go with a dynamic configuration. So I want to load it from a backend. So I already have an API that allows me to load it. So if I go to demo API sample uni degrees and call that, we'll get these two different records. And then I can train my chatbot to understand that when somebody says computer science or software, that this is actually for a degree. So we could use the name and the field values for this. Okay, so let's train our chatbot with that. So we are going to use this endpoint, and the value should be a name. And for the synonym, I'm going to use field. And then let's create this. And our chatbot is trained on 2 records. So I can say computer science, and also I can say biology. And you can see both were recognized. And in here we used a main name, while in here we used a synonym. However, the chatbot, instead of just remembering biology, it converted it back to the full degree name, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's go back to the cognitive flow, and I'm going to edit our conversation. So when somebody is registering for a course, probably one of the first things we should do is just ask them for their name, right? So we are going to ask something like, well, let's get a name. So that's the entity, and the type is text, and we can ask them, what is your name? And this will provide a little prompt to the user. And so when somebody says register student, we have this question, what is your name? And then I can say Sebastian, and the chatbot is not going to do anything else because there's just one step that is built in there for now. But this is really cool because the chatbot is already capable of asking questions and then possibly doing something about it. Okay, so next step that we should do is also a question. And this time we're gonna ask them what degree they want to study. So the entity is degree, the entity type is degree, which is the type we just created a moment ago with the two possible values. And the question should be something like, which degree would you like to study? Okay, and if I just save it like this, and we say register student, say Sebastian. See, at this moment, the student doesn't know what are the available options, or maybe they might not be able to even say it properly. So they can say IT, and the child is going to complain as in like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what's IT. So that's not exactly great in this case. So what we can do instead is provide a little prompt. So I can add a display of type quick reply. Let's save this. And this will already provide the user with a list of values. So you can see now we have biological science and computer science, and I can choose biology in here, and we're good to go. Okay. One other thing that the chatbot is capable of doing is actually recognizing when somebody provides additional values, even when we don't ask them for that. So I could say register for biology course, and the chatbot asks me for a name. So I will say it's me, and it kind of like moved on straight over, like it didn't even ask for the degree that we want to ask. And the thing is that the chatbot did understand that, it just didn't acknowledge that fact. So what we should be doing really is training our chatbot to react to any type of like additional information that it receives. So for example, for degree, we can add the reactions of type acknowledgement, and it could chatbot could say, I see you want to study a, and then I'm going to pass degree. And basically this double handlebar, what it does is grabs the value that it understands from the student and then injects in here. So if somebody says biology, it would say like a computer science or biological science. Let's save this and test that. So register for biology course. And now the acknowledgement works. And this was pretty simple and pretty straightforward. All right, so next let's ask the student for their email address. So add a question, and this is going to be email of type email. And I can ask something like, what is your at acmeuni.edu email? That's cool. And what we should do also is add a little reaction, which is a validation. So we want to validate that what the users are providing to us are of the right type. So I can say, for example, I want to validate that something is an email, and maybe the message should be something like, please provide a valid email. In addition, we could also validate that the student should provide us the email with at acme.edu. And we could say something like, please provide your at acmeu.edu email. And we can save that and let's test this. So register Sebastian. Okay, and we're studying computer science, and let's try some different emails. So I can say, Seba, well, he didn't understand it. This is not really an email. So seba@gmail.com. It recognized it as an email, but it's not the type of email it expected. So I can say, Sebastian, that should be okay, acmeu.edu, and now it accepted it. Cool, so this is all fun. And then finally, once the student provided us with all the information that are important and required, we should be able to go and register them. So what I want to do is actually do a step of type webhook and make an HTTP call to register the student. So I have this API over here that if I call the uni student register method and then pass like the name, the degree, and their email that they want to study, then the API will come back with an ID for the student or an error if this didn't work. Okay, so let's try and do that. So the endpoint is going to be this. And instead of the name that is hardcoded here, I can use again double handlebar by and saying name. Cool. Instead of the degree that is like that, I can say degree. So this is going to come from the input from the user. And then finally, for the email, we are going to use the email value in the handlebar. Perfect. So we don't need the method or headers or payload, and this should work. And we also want to grab and remember the result from this request. So this is going to be student ID. And then finally, we can print out some message to the user. So something like, excellent, you are now registered. Your student ID is student ID. So let's save this. Okay, final attempt. Register student, Sebastian. I want to study computer science. Seba at acmeu.edu. And now the process of registration is coming through. And cool, I am registered and this is my ID. And just like that, we're able to create a chatbot that can answer a couple of different questions and also register me as a student. And the final thing that we have to do is just go and publish this chatbot to one of the preferred channels. So we could publish it to Facebook Messenger or a website or into Alexa device. The choices are quite rich. So what I want to do is publish it into a website as a widget. And we are getting a little configuration in here that I just have to copy and then paste it into my project. So I have a little project over here, which I can just run very quickly just to show you how my website for the Acme University looks. And so far you don't see any chatbots in here. And what I can do in here is just at the bottom of my body, I'm going to paste that code that I just copied. We don't need the Google API. And then I will take the JavaScript and the CSS files and then put it into the header. And when we save that, our page should reload. And now we can see the chatbot icon appearing just here. So I can go, okay, yeah, let's provide a student ID. It was SEP006 SID. And that worked. And we can even ask questions to the chatbot. So when is the exam session? And the chatbot should provide us with an answer and even prompt us to kind of actually do something. And in that one simple step, we were able to deploy our chatbot into a real web page. It's pretty cool, huh? And that's all I wanted to show you for today. And if you want to learn more, here are a couple of articles that are pretty interesting that tell you more about how natural language processing works and what it is. It also gives you some tips and tricks on how you can improve the understanding of the chatbot if you know more about NLP. And I would definitely encourage you to try this at home. And here are some tutorials that are quite cool. And the first one gives you a pretty in-depth explanation of how to build a chatbot, while the following two are focusing more on the WhatsApp and SMS chatbots. And now I'd like to pass on the microphone to Ilyan Ilyev, who will talk to you about the NativeChat pilot program. So the whole idea is if you want to build a chatbot and provide it to your students or to your staff, and you don't know quite how to start, then this pilot program is actually designed to help you with this. If you need to integrate your chatbot with your student information system or any other third-party system, then again, we are very happy to help you with that. and Ilian is going to tell you all about it. Ilian, over to you.
If you're interested in introducing chatbots for your business, then the next 5 minutes will be useful for you. Okay, I would like to talk to you about the NativeChat pilot program that we are working on. The idea is that if you want to introduce a chatbot to your business, you can join our pilot program where our NativeChat engineering team will work with you to help you achieve that. The pilot works in 3 phases. The first phase is a requirements gathering phase. We work with you to figure out the scenarios that are most important for you. Then we will progress to the implementation phase. This is where we will work side by side with you to help you implement the scenarios that we agreed on during the requirements gathering phase. And finally, we will have some meetings which will be dedicated to product feedback and planning next steps. Let's have a look at each of those phases in more details. With the requirements gathering, we will start by trying to figure out what would be the best conversation flow for your scenarios. And we will come up with some sort of a script that will cover this. Then we will take a look at the questions and answers and build a list of those that would work best for you. After that, we investigate different deployment targets. You can deploy your chatbot to an Alexa device or to a web page or use Facebook Messenger. So in here we would figure out which deployment target would work for you given the time frame of the pilot, which is up to 1 month. Then we will come up with the acceptance criteria, which is basically a compilation of your actual business requirements. And all of that will be finalized in a pilot flow agreement document. The next phase is implementation. We will spend a day or two to provide you with proper training on how to use NativeChat and how to work with it. Then we will spend about 2 days on pair programming with a dedicated technical expert from your side. We will also spend about half a day working with your subject matter expert on implementing those questions and answers. And finally, we will spend about a day on setting up the deployment that you agreed on. As a result of this phase, you will have a working chatbot ready to use. And when that's done, we will move to the final phase, the sign-off. In that phase, we will hold a meeting with all your stakeholders. We will ask for feedback in terms of how it all went and whether this is something that would work for you and what would be the best way to move forward. Then we would talk about the future of this chatbot. What would it take for you to reach the next stage? And hopefully you will be a happy user of NativeChat. In terms of next steps, make sure to check the pilot program page if you have a use case in mind and would like to talk to someone from the NativeChat team about your idea. We also have a great free tutorial. You can use this to try out NativeChat. Just head out to progress.com/nativechat/chatbot-tutorial.